Welcome to part 3 of my Introduction to Filmmaking Techniques video series, which will be all about composition. For other videos in the series, like the second part of this video, how to create visual emphasis, make sure to check out the links in the description below. In cinematography, composition is essentially the presentation of visual elements in a shot, but beautiful looking shots are not created by accident. They are the product of a series of intentional choices that help guide the viewer's attention through the story, one frame at a time. Designing each frame with purpose will not only result in aesthetically pleasing and interesting images, but ones that will also convey a powerful message to the audience.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me!
Alright, so obviously one of the first things you need to consider when composing a shot is what you're going to have in your frame, or more specifically, the number of subjects or elements you're going to feature in your shot, aka population size. When there is only one character in the shot, alone, by themselves in the frame, it is called a one-shot, a single, or a solo.
You're Han Solo!
I used to be.
Using a single is an effective way to direct the audience's attention to what is most important in the scene at that particular moment, as the lone subject is obviously the main point of focus. Single shots are used in every way imaginable, most commonly as medium shots during dialogue scenes, or to showcase character expressions or reactions, and so much more, like basically any situation that you want your subject to be the center of attention.
That's good, Ray.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Next, we have the two-shot, or double, where there's obviously now two characters in the shot, but more specifically, two characters that are important to the scene and that are meant to be the focus of the shot. A two-shot can be set up or blocked in a range of formations, like a face-to-face where the characters are facing each other, as a side-by-side where they are now sitting or standing beside each other, or in any other random placements you want, like this staggered face-to-face position from the master, or this back-to-back setup from iOrigins. The key thing to remember, however, is that how you position your characters not only provides physical context to the viewer, but can also help visually represent the relationship between the characters as well. Because when there is more than one character in a shot, the audience is meant to acknowledge their relationship, whether it be a romantic moment that brings a couple closer together, a confrontational fight scene that pits two subjects against one another in combat, or a platonic situation where a couple of bros are just hanging out dancing.
We're bros! Come on, man, we're bros.
Now, as more subjects or elements are added, the name of the population size increases accordingly, like a 3-shot or a 4-shot, for example. But as the number grows even larger, the exact number of subjects becomes less significant, and therefore it makes more sense to use the terms group shot if there are a collection of subjects that are the focus, or a crowd shot if there are an overwhelming amount of subjects in the frame. However, on the other end of the spectrum, if there are no significant subjects or elements in a shot, it is referred to as an empty frame, which can be useful for establishing shots or maybe as a clean shot before a character eventually enters the frame. Population size can obviously change throughout a shot as well, with both camera and character movement, like maybe using a dolly shot to introduce more characters in the frame, or by having characters enter or exit the frame, increasing or decreasing the population size accordingly. The bottom line is that while population size is often a byproduct of the number of characters involved in the scene, it is best determined when influenced by the narrative. So if you want to isolate a viewer's attention on a specific element, use a single, and if you want to show connection and or interaction between elements, use a double, triple, etc. Oh, and remember that all population sizes can be filmed using any of the shot sizes, camera angles, and or camera movements that are covered in the rest of the videos in this series, from a wide shot to a close-up, from a high angle to a low angle, or from a static shot to any sort of camera movement you want.
Can you imagine that?
This brings us to the next aspect you might consider when composing your shot, which is whether the frame is clean, dirty, and or busy. A clean shot is when there is a subject or subjects that are clearly visible with no other characters or distracting elements anywhere in the frame, meaning that there is nothing in the foreground that might block our view of the subject and no other characters in the background that might draw our attention away from the main subject, like this clean single and this clean double. A dirty shot, on the other hand, is when there is now a limited presence of something else in the foreground that is blocking our view of the subject. In a dirty single or a dirty double, the foreground elements are usually blurred and help to showcase depth within the scene, especially in combination with camera movement, whether the movement is horizontal or vertical. But when the foreground element is another character, it also serves to show connection, proximity, and reinforce the relative position of the characters to each other.
How close were you to the victim?
Real close.
Finally, there's the busy shot, where the potentially distracting elements are more so in the background now, rather than in the foreground. A busy shot still has a single point of focus, like a single subject or even multiple subjects, but there are also other, less significant things that may be happening throughout the rest of the frame as well. And obviously, there's many shots that will be both dirty and busy at the same time, like maybe during an elaborate battle, or a dance scene where the main character is surrounded by others dancing around them.
That sounds like a dare, Harry.
It's a double dare.
Yeah, okay, you're on.
The outlier in all of this is the over-the-shoulder shot, which is sort of a hybrid between a dirty single, because we only see one face, and a double shot, as there are two characters interacting in the frame. For that reason, I don't classify it as either, and we'll just call it an over-the-shoulder single or over single, or sometimes an over-the-shoulder double or over double if there are two characters in the shot.
Wait up, where my moment go?
You passed out, you wet your underpants, I thought you were dying.
I did not wet my underpants, okay? They're wet. Ew, super wet.
Now that you've determined what is going to be in the shot, the next order of business is to decide where you're going to position or place each subject and/or element to create balance within the frame. For wider shots, this typically means that you'll have to carefully balance or position several subjects and/or elements that exist throughout the frame, while for closer shots, since the field of view narrows, balance is more likely achieved by strategically placing a specific detail or important object at key points in the frame.
We're here to learn. Anybody else have a problem with that?
A frame that is symmetrical is one where both sides of the frame are basically mirror images of each other, either divided into identical halves on opposite sides of a dividing line, called bilateral symmetry, or positioned around a center axis, called radial symmetry, both of which have a calming effect on the viewer because there's an order and satisfied expectation of something. While the most obvious way to create symmetry is probably with the equal placement of environmental elements on opposite sides of the frame, i.e. structural features like columns, windows, or staircases, it can also be achieved with carefully positioned subjects as well, like a well-organized group shot, or simply by placing a subject in the center of the frame, as humans and their faces, while not perfectly balanced, are essentially symmetrical. Now, even though central framing is often an aesthetically motivated, stylized choice, as we are inherently attracted to and enjoy symmetry, it can also be used, among other things, to create tension and drama in thrillers and horrors, to help make sense of a character's surroundings by immersing them within an environment, to give a subject tremendous power and dominance, particularly in combination with a low angle, or even for comedic effect, and I quote, by means of geometrical tableaus, like this example from Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Hotbox.
Reflection is another interesting way to create symmetry within a frame, and not just with mirrors. Any reflective surface can be used for this effect, even if sometimes the reflection is not exactly in the middle of the frame.
Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Now, when you compose a shot where the image cannot be divided into identical halves, it is known as asymmetrical balance, or asymmetry, meaning that although the sides may not be exactly the same, the visual weight of their elements still suggests a sense of balance, most often achieved by adjusting the relative position of said interacting elements. So basically, if one side of the frame contains something of importance that is larger or closer, The other side will balance that with something or many things of equal visual weight that are probably smaller or further away.
Well, that was easy. Yeah, I guess it was.
In film, using the rule of thirds is probably the most common way to position a subject when composing an asymmetrical shot. By visually dividing the frame into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, it creates a guide or grid on which to position the most visually interesting or important elements of the shot. You can either place a character, an object, or even your horizon along one of the lines, or you can place a specific detail, like an eye, on one of the points at which the lines intersect. Following the rule of thirds will help you achieve a balanced arrangement of significant objects in the shot, making them more harmonious and compelling to the audience. This brings us to the other rule that is synonymous with asymmetry, the rule of space, where you leave more room within the frame in front of rather than behind the subject. Typically used in combination with the rule of thirds, the rule of space is often referred to as looking room when more negative space is present in front of where the subject is looking or facing, and is referred to as leading room when more negative space is present in front of where a subject is traveling or moving towards.
Come with me if you want to live.
But just to be clear, the rule of space also applies to the horizontal axis or vertical arrangement of subjects in the frame as well. Placing a character high in the frame means that the look or lead room is toward the bottom of the frame, which is good for when characters are walking downstairs, for example, while placing a character low in the frame is a good way to show what a character might be looking at up in the sky, as the look or lead room is now near the top of the frame, like this example from the movie Up. The amount of look or lead room necessary, however, will vary dependent upon the angle of the subject to the camera. For example, a person looking slightly off camera will require less look or lead room than a profile shot of a fast-moving subject. Either way, the rule of space is an effective way to show the relative position of a subject, where sometimes the viewer will get to see what the character sees or is experiencing, and other times it's implied, giving the impression that the subject is looking at or interacting with someone or something that is just off screen. The most common application of these rules together is probably for dialogue scenes, whether we're talking a face-to-face shot, over-the-shoulder shots, or closer single shots.
I don't like that. Put your tongue back in your mouth.
By always placing each of the subjects on opposite thirds, or as reverse shots of each other, looking in towards the center of the frame, it not only keeps the frame balanced, but also connects the characters both physically within the space and emotionally within the story. This technique, also known as the 180 rule, is achieved by always keeping the camera on the same side of your subjects for every shot in the scene.
Come on, help me get out of here.
I'll help you. With my foot! Get him. Oh, get him.
Headroom, or the amount of space between the top of the subject's head and the top of the frame, is also an important thing to consider when framing a shot. Typically, a wider shot will have lots of headroom, a medium shot will have just a sliver of space above the head, and a close-up shot will have none, as part of the head will probably be cut off.
I'm gonna rip you in half now.
That is such a juggernaut thing to say.
When subjects are given extra headroom, it's usually to show the verticality of the environment, or to imply that the character should maybe be seen as insignificant or overwhelmed in that moment, like this example from the King's Speech.
Whatever. Those rules aren't real.
Having said all that, these rules can be broken if you have reason to do so, as following the rules communicates one thing to the audience, while breaking them communicates something else entirely. For example, by not following the rule of space and having a character face toward the small side of the frame, which is known as short-sighting, it can make your subject appear lonely or trapped, like this example from Pirates of the Caribbean, and is a great way to introduce some sort of danger that might be lurking behind a character, like this example from Penny Dreadful. In the end, just remember that composing a shot is not just about making the frame visually appealing, but rather, more importantly, it's about conveying a message that helps drive home the narrative of the story. But in order to really captivate your audience, you're also going to need to know how to create visual emphasis in the frame as well. Because if you simply make a beautiful shot without structure, your audience's attention is going to scatter as they attempt to take everything in. To watch my video about different ways to create emphasis, make sure to check out the link in the description below. If you got something out of this video, make sure to drop a like, and if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.